Hello everybody, Joshua Pollard here, the Oil Mutt. First of all, I'd like to thank you for checking out my content. I'll be the first to tell you, I'm not that tech savvy and this is all new to me. So I'm kind of throwing it together, but I'm hoping the value and the content carries me. So if you're a negative Nancy, you're probably going to be complaining because of my technical lack of understanding. But if you're actually looking to learn new things, think about new things, I think this podcast will do very well for you. I will say it a couple times in this podcast. This is more to get you thinking about stuff than actual set in stone. There are so many different variables when it comes to buying oil and gas wells, but it is to get you thinking and making better decisions based on more research, more knowledge. So with that, let's get into it. Now, thoughts on price per barrel. There are some major price movers, and I'm talking 5,000 per flowing barrel to 50,000 per flowing barrel. It does happen. There are things that can kill a deal, things that can make a deal 10 times better that the operator isn't monetizing. There are a bunch of different aspects. We're going to dive into them weekly. Up on this week podcast, I am going to touch on a few of them, but every Sunday or Monday, I will be releasing a new podcast episode that dives into more things, hopefully building up your knowledge, building up your thinking of everything. And as I said again, these are opinions. I am not a lawyer, I'm not an accountant, none of that stuff. These are just my own observations and opinions, but hopefully it will give you a better understanding and will make you a better buyer and seller of oil and gas assets. Flowing barrel is simply when you buy a prospect or a lease, what is the per barrel cost of that lease? So as an example, if you got a 10 barrel a day lease that sells for $250,000, 10 barrels at $250,000, that means your price per flowing barrel is $25,000 per barrel. You just take the price divided by the barrels per day, and that's your price. It's that simple. To give a general idea on that deal, with a 75% NRI pre-tax, you're looking at about $136,875 a gross. That doesn't take out taxes, lifting costs, anything of that. So you're looking right around probably 50% gross return at $25,000 a barrel at $50 oil. If you're looking on YouTube and you're actually watching the slides, I've got a PowerPoint presentation. Feel free to email me, theoilmutt@gmail.com. Same with Apple Podcasts. If you want, I've got a kind of bullet point slides going. So feel free to email me and I'll send you the PowerPoint on it. But I actually break it down to get what it will gross produce. You've got 10 barrels, $50. That is $500 a day. So you take the $500 a day, times it by 365, and it gives you $182,500 a year. $182,500 a year times 0.75, which is your net revenue interest, gives you $136,875. Basic math, as I said, that's a gross that doesn't take in taxes, lifting costs, any of the things we're going to talk about, but just kind of give you an idea. You need to start with what a barrel a day will make you. And from there, you can kind of visualize and understand how long it's going to take you to make your money back. You can cost effective identify upside, repairs, all that fun stuff. But that is the basics of this. Is the price per barrel is simply the flowing barrels, and you take the price and divide it by those flowing barrels. I hope that makes sense. But let's get into some of the things that can move. Let's get into some of the things that can move this price. Political climate. If you are paying attention to the news, you have seen why this is a major price mover on a flowing barrel cost. If you are in federal leases or the pipeline industry, you know it too well. New President Biden just put a moratorium on federal leases. He shut down the Keystone Pipeline. Political climate is a dangerous game, and you need to know what the political agenda is wherever you're buying leases. If you're on federal, the price per barrel goes down tremendously. It just simply does. There's more costs associated with it. I could make a whole episode about me and the guys getting our asses kicked out in Arizona from a political climate that did not like drilling. From finding 10,000-year-old Clovis sites on a location and having to change everything to flat out getting railroaded by a commissioner. The political climate is a dangerous game, and you've got to know when you're playing it. California, some of these other states, your price per barrel goes down substantially because of that political climate that you have to deal with. Another factor is, can the citizens of that state vote for something? Like, can somebody come out and say, hey, we want to vote for no more drilling? And then they put it to a vote. Colorado saw a scary vote, I believe it was last year, the year before, where they were wanting to completely ban fracking, which is crazy. But if you're in Colorado, that's something to think about when buying wells. You've got to price in that political climate. Me personally, I price it at 0. If it is an anti-oil and gas climate, I price it at 0, meaning I won't touch it. You can't give it to me. California, you couldn't give them to me. Colorado is getting to the point where I probably wouldn't take them. As a matter of fact, I didn't take some wells not too long ago. It's scary, the trends that some of these states are going in, and now federal's the same way. I don't believe I'd take a federal lease right now. If it's producing, I don't know if I'd take it, because although they may not ban it, they are liable to put so much red tape, it makes it commercially just impossible to make money with producing assets. It's just one of those things, but it's something to keep in mind, the political climate, because it can bite you. Again, to each their own. But I personally, I'm not messing with any federal leases that are producing. And as far as state lands, if it's not a friendly climate, as in a red drill baby drill state, Texas, etc., I'm not messing with it. Period. That is a scary scenario, and I honestly can't tell you where it's going to go. Honestly can't. Biden, on multiple occasions, has said, hey, fracking, we need it. But then he turns right around and shuts down the Keystone Pipeline, puts a moratorium on drilling. And it's a scary place to be in right now if you are on federal lands or in an anti-oil and gas state. So keep that in mind. As I said, political climate, I'm not taking it. Not doing it. Sorry, but I'm not doing it. All right, let's move on. Next is important, geology and production. Do you need an engineer? Do you need a geologist to look at the stuff? What has the production done? If it's been steady for years, it's a lot easier to price that asset because it's reliable, it's old faithful. If it's spotty, it can be spotty production because of a bad operator, mechanical failures. You've really got to dive in and figure out what's going on if the production is not like clockwork, because conventional production typically is pretty straightforward. it's pretty reliable. So if it's spotty production, you need to bring in a professional, take a look at it. There are various plays as well. The Austin Chalk is a prime example where you can actually go in, refrac it, and bring it back on a little bit better. But there are also plays you can put $1 million into a well and it's never going to do anything again. So whenever you get into that kind of scenario, I always recommend getting a petroleum engineer, geologist, a guy that knows what he's looking at, and don't just pick any engineer. You need that specific geologic area. You need an engineer that knows that area. Because if you're pulling a guy from the Balkan to look at a strong field in Texas, that may not work. He may not understand it completely. He may not know the small whatever. He may not know the small stuff of it. So always, 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 if you don't know, find somebody that does. I can't stress that enough. Water floods are another example. There are certain scenarios that can happen where a water flood, where they're injecting water into the zone to produce more oil, the water contact line of the oil can eventually move off your lease, and then one day it just turns to water and you're done. You need to know that if you're messing with injection, you need to have an engineer or somebody that knows what they're doing take a look at it. Make sure that in 6 weeks, 6 months, 6 years, you're not going to wake up one day and be producing nothing but the Atlantic Ocean. It happens all the time. You need to understand that. We're going to dive into water production in this as well, but it's something you've got to look at and understand. Another key factor, I see it all the time, guys want to sell their leases, so they do some kind of trick on it to increase production, whether they've had a well shut in for a long time, they turn it back on and it's flush production where it's all that oil built up. So it looks like it's a lot of oil coming in. It looks like it's doing 6 barrels, 7 barrels a day, but in reality, the well's only good for 3. But because it's shut in, that flush production bumps it. So you don't want to pay for flush production. Reworks are the same thing. If they go in and clean it out and it doubles production, well, that doubled production may only last 90 days. So if you're buying on day 30 of that rework, you're overpaying, really. And then in 60 days, it's back down to what it was doing, and you overpaid. So you've got to bring in an expert. I can't stress this enough. Get an expert to take a look. And when I talk about anomalies in a production, if it's been making 3 barrels like clockwork for 2 or 3 years, and then out of nowhere, 3 months before they go to sell it, it starts bumping up, figure out why it did that. And more importantly, do not pay for it if it's under 90 days, because it could be back to what it was doing before. Very, very important. Next, saltwater. Saltwater is a key driving factor of price per barrel. You have disposal costs. You need to figure out how much water makes a well uneconomic. If you are hauling water, meaning somebody comes and takes your salt water and takes it to their disposal, you're looking at $1.25 to $2 per barrel of water, which means at $25 or 25 barrels, at 25 barrels, you're toast if you're only making a barrel a day. So you can handle 25 barrels of water per barrel of oil. Water can kill you quicker than anything else. If you're injecting in-house, that number goes up substantially. Typically, it's 10 to 15 cents per barrel to inject in your own well. That does not include lifting costs. I will say that, because you've got to remember, you got to lift the water with the oil out of the ground, so that's another factor of price. But typically, if you say 25 cents a barrel to inject yourself on your own lease, now you've definitely gone up in how much water you can produce per barrel. Now, if you're producing 25 barrels of water a day, but the well is making 10 barrels of oil a day, then it's not so bad. But you need to calculate what the cost is. You do that. Look at the pump motor that injects. On the electric motors, they'll have a tag, and you take the amps and you take the volts, you times them together, and then the efficiency number, and that gives you the kilowatt hours. I'll make a whole video on that, post it on Facebook and YouTube so you can understand that better. But the kilowatt hours will decide what the cost is to pump that water. And I can't stress this enough. When you look at a well, like Google, even if you're looking at Google Earth, typically you can see that fiberglass water tank separated from the steel oil tank. Whenever you see that water tank, you know it produces water. So you've got to check out that water, because it influences saltwater production. It influences greatly what is going on with the price per barrel. There's also a scenario where it could be a gold mine because it produces a lot of water, but the zone that you're injecting the water into actually takes it all on vacuum. Think of it like a bathtub full of water and you pull the plug out. It just drains. There are injection wells that actually do that, where you pour the water down the hole and the weight of the fluid column just pushes out into the zone, and you're in essence injecting for free. Typically, operators do not monetize those when they sell a well, but I'm telling you 100% that is a gold mine, because you are getting free disposal basically on that lease. And I've seen deals where operators are heavily discounting their production price per barrel because it produces so much water, but then you get out there and you look, and the injection well takes it all on vacuum, and you don't even have to run a pump to get rid of the water. That is a home run win, and you should look for it. One other thing, kind of going out here, but I want to circle back to it, is call and get prices of water disposal, because it is an important thing. This is arguably one of the most important deals. I think we're going to get into plugging liability. That's important too. But get prices on disposal. You need to know what it's doing water-wise. Also, when you look at a deal, there's so much. I apologize, guys. There's so much that you need to think about. One of the deals I have seen, and I see it often, is there's actually a fee per barrel to the mineral landowner, and you have to kind of root that out. Sell side never wants to talk about it. I won't name any of the brokers, but they always leave out that part. Always, always, always ask if there is a fee per barrel to the landowner for water disposal. Because if you get hit with a 10 cent, 25 cents a barrel fee, that adds up real quick too. Got to check on it. I could write a book on this subject. I could write a book on this whole thing, honestly. But just get your mind thinking, because they never talk about it. But sure as you're born, you're going to pick up a lease, and that could break. Plugging liability. This is a big one. This is as big, if not bigger, than water production. I see it way too often. People do not price in plugging liability. If you've got 10 wells on a lease, they say, hey, I've got 5 really good wells. But these other 5 are pluggers. That goes into the price, make no mistake. Ideally, you can plug a well for $3 to $5 a foot. In reality, it can go to hell in a handbasket in a hurry, and I've seen 5,000-foot wells cost $100,000 to plug. The plugging liability is a major price influencer. Just looked at a deal the other day, making 10 barrels a day, but it had $1.5 million plugging liability. I said, no thanks, best of luck to you. It is real. The plugging liability will get you in more trouble than anything else. You do not want the plugging liability. If a well is shut in, figure out why it's shut in. If a well's not producing, figure out why it's not producing, because this plugging liability will come after you. The state of Texas, I can't speak for everybody else, but the state of Texas does not like a well just sitting around doing absolutely nothing. Either you plug it or you start getting fined. So you can file for shut-in, things of that nature, but the plugging liability is something you must look at. A lot of these companies, major companies, have massive plugging liabilities, but they never talk about them. And when they do talk about them, they give them some pie in the sky number for plugging. This is something you have to check on. If you've got wells that are not working, that have no use, that is a massive plugging liability, and that must be worked into the price. We were using $250,000 earlier for 10 barrel a day. Well, if you've got $200,000 worth of plugging on that lease, you have to factor that in, because the 200,000 could shoot up to 400,000 if you run into problems. So factor that in. Typically, operators selling aren't real big on the plugging liability, and they don't really give credit for that, as in discount the price. If they do not accept the plugging liability and what it's going to cost, walk away from that deal, because that's going to cost you, and then you're stuck with it and you've got to plug it. Don't be the sucker on the other end of having to plug. I've seen it a million times. I cannot say this enough. If you're not sure, as I said earlier, get an expert to look it over. Call plugging company. They're everywhere. Call plugging company, say, hey, I'm looking at buying this deal. What do you think it would cost to plug these wells? People are very helpful in this industry. So if you call up a plugging company and say, hey, I'm looking at this, but I'd like to kind of get a ballpark bid of what it would cost to plug wells 3, 7, and 8. They're about 4,000 foot deep. What do you think that would cost? Now, they're going to come back and say, well, that's not a straightforward answer, which it's not. But typically they can ballpark, hey, if nothing goes wrong, it'll be X amount. This also changes drastically in the Permian, Eagle Ford. If you're in shale country, it gets higher. The rent goes up. The Permian Basin, I compare that to being like in Malibu, California. Like, it's overpriced. Everything is overpriced. I love the Fort Worth Basin. It's probably one of the cheapest, most prolific basins for the cost you can get. East Texas is pretty good too, but Fort Worth Basin, things are cheap. Pull rigs are cheap. Plugging is cheap. Everything is cheap, but I can't stress this enough. If you're in the Eagle Ford, and this always on Twitter, if you follow me on Twitter, this burns people's butts all the time when I say it, but it is 100% correct. And that is, behind pipe is BS. You don't pay for behind pipe. Another one, not to steal from the movie, but if you frack it, it will come. That is not always the case. An old timer once told me the only ones claiming behind pipe has real value are the ones selling the stuff. And that is a very true statement. Do not pay for behind pipe. Behind pipe, to give you an idea, if a well says producing in a 5,000 foot zone, Behind pipe is the operator saying, hey, that 5,000 foot zone isn't very good, but you can move up hole and get 50 barrels a day in the 3,000 foot zone. That's behind pipe, that zone that's not touched yet. Operators try to monetize behind pipe. Do not pay for it. If you have to, walk away, because it will bite you in the behind. I'm sorry, I'm trying to clean this up language-wise, so it sounds kind of off, but behind pipe is one of those things you do not want to pay for. Fracking and rework claims are a dime a dozen, and they are the same thing. An operator is selling 2 or 3 barrel a day well, and he's trying to charge you 25 grand per barrel because he says if you rework it or frack it, it'll make a whole bunch of oil. No, you do not pay for that. You don't pay for it, period. Because you don't know, he doesn't know. He's selling. He's like a used car salesman. He's just trying to get a higher price. Do not pay for behind pipe and or rework frac claims, because it's BS. 90% of them don't work. And I want to tell you a story from my own personal experience, and this is one of the reasons why I refuse to do it. Guys get pissed at me. They don't even bring up behind pipe because they know I'm not signing off on it. I'm not paying for it, period. A few years ago, I found the well was crappy. It was like a barrel a day well, but up hole on the logs, there was a massive, massive conglomerate zone. It looked like just Moby Dick waiting to be caught. It was a monster zone on the logs. So I reached out to them and said, hey, would you sell this well? And they caught me. They're like, well, yeah, but what are you going to pay us for that conglomerate zone? It's like, damn, they got me. Right? They knew about the zone too. Well, we got to talking. Everybody and their mama signed off on this zone, this conglomerate zone up hole, as being a monster. It just had all the makings of a complete and utter monster. A certain fellow out of Abilene for a certain company I won't name because this was a complete failure, as you'll hear. He signed off on it, thought it would make 30, 40 barrels a day. It was a monster. Absolute monster, folks. So we worked out a deal where I could buy in, gave me an option 60 days to buy in to move up hole on this well. Well, I couldn't get the money together, burned my ass up. I couldn't get the money together. They went on and did the uphole moved uphole, perfed it, did the frack. That POS, I kid you not, didn't even clear a barrel a day. A barrel a day. And we were everybody, I'm talking 8 different people, looked at this log and said, this is going to be a monster. It did a barrel a day. That is the danger of behind pipe. It can look perfect. It can look great. Then you move up hole, hit it, and it does absolutely nothing. That is why I don't buy and I do not pay for behind pipe. If you do, good on you. But you are begging for disaster and financial loss when you pay a premium for behind pipe. I'm telling you right now. And this story I'm telling you about is a prime example. Everybody thought this was going to be a monster. Experts. The guy out of Abilene is arguably the log whisperer of Texas. He is the go-to guy for log interpretation. He got it wrong with everybody else. But that's why you do not pay for behind pipe, and you do not pay for, if you rework it, it will come. If you frack it, it will come. It's crap. If it was so good, they would have done it themselves. You know what I mean? So there are 0 guarantees in this business. More importantly, you do not pay for pipe dreams behind pipe. Period. Theatrics of this may not be that great, but I hope the content got you thinking. I really appreciate you. Check out Oil Mutt on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Just search Oil Mutt on Google and we should pop up. If you want to donate to the show, I will not refuse your money. I am not above refusing money. You can check me out on PayPal. Check Oil Mutt, Venmo, Joshua-Pollard-14, and Cash App is Oil Mutt. But I appreciate you. Thanks for watching. And again, if you want a copy of this presentation, email theoilmutt@gmail.com and I will send it over to you. If you ever have any questions, feel free to email me. I love talking to you guys. I love hearing your feedback. And with that, thank you very much and have a good day.